Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Well, thank you.
And David, welcome back.
Hi, folks.
So I saw this really cool thing while we're kind of letting people get in here and get ready. Here we go. Let me share this on my screen. This is a model of the player's handbook in 3 dimensions. It looks really cool, I thought.
Yeah, I saw that on X like an hour ago.
Yeah.
And I thought the same thing. I'm like, wow, that's cool.
I went looking for who the person was that did it. It said it was John David Odell. I left a message on the original X to see if they would share any more, but I couldn't find them with a quick search on Google. But that looked really cool. We got our first guest already. Get up. Okay, let's hear what crime Chris wants to do here. And then the next thing I saw that's pretty cool is from WizKids. So if you recall, I might have to drag it out on the screen here. But
that's the basic Dungeons & Dragons cover,
yeah. And they got the 2 characters
or
now,
one of the basic Dungeons & Dragons covers.
Yeah. The blue box, I think, is the one I started with, the Holmes blue box. And these are some of the very rare characters they're talking about having.
Yeah.
Which
I started with
the
pink one, Moldvay, I think it was called, the Moldvay set.
I think it might have been pink. I thought mine was blue, I thought.
It had a green dragon on the front, and then there was a blue as well. That was the expert set.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about what rules to steal. Got a note here from Math Guy Dave. Doing my own prep for my game tonight while listening in. Thanks for joining us, Math Guy Dave. Okay, so we just played, all 3 of us, played the MCDM RPG. What did you guys think of that? I know the rules are super preliminary, but was there anything there that you thought, oh, that's really interesting?
Yeah, I mean, there was lots of interesting stuff. I was actually thinking since our game about the Bane and Boon system, because of course it's obviously thematically the same as advantage and disadvantage, but the mechanics are quite different. And for any of the viewers who don't, I think the viewers do know, because I know both people who are on. But you get the additional D4s, right? And they cancel out, and you have to keep score, right? So if you have more than one source of boon, that matters. I'm not sure I love rolling a bunch of D4s.
Yeah, I don't really either.
I don't like D4s. And also just I was thinking about it. And I'm like, if you started stacking up this stuff, right? Like if you actually concentrate on, I'm going to figure out how many boons I can get on this, and you got a bunch on there, I think it kind of wrecks bounded accuracy, because it's less random the more you add, right? The closer to the average you're going to be pushed towards. And I was actually thinking, are either of you familiar with the game Alternity from TSR?
Very, very little. Oh, David's got it right there on his shelf, I bet.
Yeah.
Yes, this one.
There it is.
Yes, I really like the die step system where
the situation die.
Yeah,
I was thinking that might be a better thing for MCDM, is to use the situation. So with the situation die, it's kind of the same, except it goes from a D4 to a D6 to a D8 to a D10 to a D12, rather than adding additional D4s. And I thought that might actually be a better system. Like if we're talking about stealing rules.
Yeah.
Another interesting take on it is Shadow in the Dark, or Shadow of the Demon Lord. So it does the same kind of thing, except it uses D6s, and they can stack, but you don't add them all up. You take the highest of the ones you roll.
Yeah.
So if you roll 3 D6s, you take the highest of those 3.
I've had a chance to play that a couple times. One of my patrons runs it.
Yeah. Chief Matt, thanks for joining us. Hey, everyone. And CredHup's got a comment here. I did feel the primary resolution mechanics in MCDM RPG felt bulky. It wasn't the worst by any means, but I felt it could be refined to be a lot better. Well, it's already they're already changing stuff, right?
Yeah.
So the overall mechanics, I think they're talking about going away from 2d6 and going to things that are more like weapon dice, like d8s and d10s and d12s. That would change with your weapon you're using,
That's a
which is
big
interesting.
change.
Big change, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
then they have to redo their critical system as well, right?
Yep. They were talking about how are they going to redo their critical system. Um, the one thing I really enjoyed about the game that I didn't think I would when I first read the rules was the initiative system, going back and forth on initiative like we did. Uh,
I like your method for doing it. I still don't like it as a rule,
yeah.
right? You had a good hack to make it work.
And it takes a hack
Yeah.
because otherwise I feel like you're going to be basically fighting every round.
Yeah.
Every round, every action. Oh no, I want to go now, or you should do this. You should, and everyone's playing each other's characters.
Or even if it's not a fight, just like
It's
the
a
players
level
I
of,
play with, like you, Math Guy Dave, would be ultra interested in considering every option. Which player? What can you do? What can you set up for this other player? And every single turn would bog down like crazy with the people I play with, and me.
even if you add in just that extra level of decision making with folks who don't care, there's a certain amount of friction that goes on with there. So it really helps to have some kind of prop or something to pass the baton.
Well, I mean, Tom, you just announced the next player, and if people were all set at one, you're like, well, they don't care.
Yeah.
So
I took everyone's list on the list.
Yeah.
If they didn't care, I took everyone's list in the list, and then if they did care, and it was rare that you'd have a couple people say, "I want to go right now," and then they could quickly decide. It went pretty fast.
Yeah,
that said,
go ahead, David.
I absolutely love the rules for unbalanced. And we saw a little bit of a reflection of that when the 100 dungeons, 1,000 dungeons we were talking about last week. Mm-hmm. So great to have players who are down still heroically able to do things and, able to weigh how much risk they want to take and how much they want to press their luck to be heroic or to be safe. How much do you love your character too?
I think you're going to have more character death in MCDM than D&D.
And that's fine because you're going to be racing towards the light. Your grandparents are going to be there. And if you're going to be starting to do a lot of actions on the battlefield and drawing attention to yourself at 0 hit points, what could well happen.
Yeah.
So it's certainly not like you didn't sign the waiver, metaphorically speaking.
I like it for sure. The unintended consequence here is there's kind of a buffer for players, because if you're fighting a monster that's attacking 5 times and they take you down in your first attack, they're going to move on to someone else. Mm-hmm. And you're kind of safe for a brief second.
I almost read it like you have 150% of your hit points, but you die at 0.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because the monster,
but when you're at low hit points, you can't heal yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. The monster will keep attacking you. So that brings some danger in that you got to watch out for. And I think that if we weren't really challenged in the playtest that we played, so we didn't get to playtest this.
No.
It'd be interesting to see how it felt when we were actually at death's door and trying to do something but couldn't do anything, and just dying quicker and quicker and quicker.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's get some more questions here from Ketup. I like the fact that they're developing smart enough to not get married to their first ideas. Definitely. They seem so far willing to change. Too many devs won't do that. Absolutely. Math Guy Dave, in a group of optimizers playing in a one-shot, it was pretty big disaster of people telling other people when to go and what to do. Yeah. And I mean, just as a DM, you can police that as a DM and try and make sure that doesn't happen. But
he says it would be awful in our Patreon one-shots. So we have Math Guy Dave is one of my patrons, and we have these patron one-shots, and everybody, like 90% are optimizers. And even if we're playtesting the D&D rules, the new alert feat lets you switch.
Yeah.
Once
like that.
at the beginning of combat.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't believe the drag that puts on our games.
Yeah.
That one discussion.
Yeah, I was unhappy when I saw that change. I was hoping they'd get rid of it. I bet they keep it though. We'll see. The only major point I was not sure I was happy about was codifying strict rules for social situations That's okay solo, but a GM run game, I'm not sure I'm a fan. Yeah. Now,
That's a
that's
system
on the
you
DM
could
a little bit, right?
definitely take
Now
or
I
leave.
know Ked Hub's favorite game is Cypher.
Yeah.
Right. So he likes rules light.
Okay. The other one was no attack roll, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I didn't miss the attack roll. I started doing a whole bunch of stuff on Excel, doing a bunch of charts to see how you do that in D&D. And all the numbers kind of vary a little bit, but it's basically every additional hit die you have is approximately 10%, or every additional armor class point you have is about equivalent to 10% more hit points. It varies a lot by where exactly in the attack roll range you are. And at higher armor classes, it's much more helpful to get a one bonus when things can barely hit you. When they hit you, on 2 out of 20, and then you bump your armor class 1 more point, now they're hitting you 1 out of 20, you've cut their chance of hitting in half. So it varies a lot where you're at in the range, but an approximate number is 10%. You could just go into D&D and do that.
Yeah, I think it would end up affecting a lot of things.
Yeah, it would,
because it's not just attack rolls. Yeah, the system is based on having those attack rolls. So
yeah,
you got to go into spells and features and anything in the game that gives defense.
Yeah,
it can no longer give armor class. So you need or disadvantage on the attack roll. So you have to redo all these things, right?
Yeah, it's not going to be in D&D 2024. That's for sure.
No.
That's
way too late to make a change like that.
Right. So, Chris, I want to take a step back. You were saying that most of your Patreons are optimizers. Your YouTube channel is mostly character optimization, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly rules analysis these days, but I still do. I'm an optimizer, and I still do some optimization.
How did that take off?
Yeah, so back in the old days of 3.5, Wizards of the Coast had a forum online, and there was an optimization community on that forum, and I was a member of that. And I used to write character guides, and they were relatively popular. And then when Paizo started Pathfinder, I went over there and did the same thing, and those were pretty popular. And I decided to do video form mainly because I started to see D&D YouTubers who were talking about quitting their jobs and just doing YouTube and, paid play or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if I could do that. And so that's kind of what started the YouTube thing. But I did it for fun for decades before that. Yeah.
If you were watching closely, you just saw a light of realization cross my face, because suddenly I remember I've seen your character optimization guides on the web many times.
Yeah,
it's like Treant's Guide to
Wizards bards or druids or whatever.
Treantmonk. Yeah. Oh, okay. Wow.
I really like your take on optimization and spells and such, where you're not afraid to find that one that is just the choice and get rid of it. And that, a lot of people say, well, you're taking away, my best option, but you're saying, well, I'm giving you the opportunity to make a lot of choice.
This comes up all the time, people assume that if you take away the best option, you're taking away options. I argue you're giving options, because if you only had one option, then that's not really having a bunch of options. But if you take it away and then the second place is kind of a tie between 10 things, I just gave you 9 additional options.
Yeah, I like that take. One more from Matt. Math Guy Dave. I don't miss the attack roll, but maybe I would miss the ability to tune my chances to hit when making my character, but I don't think MCDM is looking like a game about building a character anyway. Well, we'll see. I mean, they're talking about having a lot of options in character building, so we'll see how that turns out. But you're right. There was an interesting dichotomy with the boons and banes, right? It's like when they were affecting a skill check, which was I made it or I didn't make it, they were really important. When they're affecting your attack, which was, it's just a little bit more damage or a little bit less damage, they were much less important.
Well, we've seen such a tiny snapshot.
True. Yeah.
Because immediately, like I was definitely thinking, I wonder once the game is done, if there's a route to a character optimization by stacking on boons, right? Like if you can get enough sources of boon through tactics, through features, through whatever, you could add a lot of damage, right? And
Right.
since you're automatically hitting, it's damage, right?
So, any last words here on MCDM before we go to the next one?
Okay. Well, one other thing I love that no one's going to take and put into D&D, I don't think, we're not going to see it in 2024 at least, is that the characters' hit points start off fairly high.
Oh yeah.
And I get the impression that they don't
Scale that
skyrocket,
yeah.
which I think is a much better design than what we've got for 5th edition, where they start with soap bubble characters for the new players who are most likely to get killed. And then as the challenge and difficulty of the game goes up, your hit points grow to giant levels to the point where
yeah, I would
Tom's
argue
got macros for 1.7 times the damage and stuff. It's just the whole.
I would argue the difficulty of the game goes down.
Yeah,
right?
It
sure.
It doesn't go up at all. Yeah.
It does. Let's see. Is anyone going to break the boon economy? It'll be Treantmonk and maybe Colby. Okay, let's look at Shadow Dark. Now, you don't have a lot of experience with this, right?
I played it one time.
You played it one time? Okay. So from Shadow Dark is interesting because it is completely anti-optimizer. It is random character generation all the way, even you're leveling up. But
it reminded me of Basic.
Yeah. Now, I've always been optimizer and building character, but I feel more fun in just optimizing the use of a character that's underpowered. And that's what this game really, you're going to have to do, because your character could be really underpowered. We know David had a 3rd level rogue with 3 hit points when we were playing the game.
Yes.
And it's all completely a different mindset too. You're trying to avoid the fights. You're not trying to get into fights, which if you're about the tactical combat could be a lot less fun, right? Was there anything from the rule set, David, that you really liked?
I think one of the things that I liked from the rule set is something that I think you're kind of been using in the games that you've been running lately, Tom, is where you've been equating real-time playing to time spent in the dungeon exploring, so that your torches last an hour of real time and your potions last that long and that kind of thing. Kind of adds a sense of urgency, kind of avoids a lot of fussing about, well, did 10 minutes pass since the last thing we did? It just cuts through a lot of clutter and makes it transparent and creates a sense of urgency all at once. I think that's a cool way to run things.
Yeah, the game really does bring urgency to the game. Resource management, because your encumbrance is pretty simple, but you can't carry much. So you have to really decide what you're going to bring, and you need light, and nothing has dark vision. So light
that's
is
what I like
critical.
most.
Yeah. Light is absolutely critical in that game. There's a couple more questions here. Ket up, if anyone is going to break the... Oh, I already did that one. Alex, optimizing an up character is the key appeal of OSR for me. UP? Is that it?
Underpowered.
Underpowered. Got it.
Back in the days when OSR was just, the game, the whole idea of showing player skill wasn't to optimize the characters. It was to take the hand that you were dealt by the dice and make the best play out of it.
Am I the only one who found a quick end to my characters with 1 hit point? Like, I got the fighter with 1 hit point and he's going to stupidly run up to, too bad he died.
Yep. Yeah. There's always that chance, right?
You knew you were taking the risk when you...
Yeah.
There was no risk. I knew exactly how that was going to end. Yeah.
Interestingly, if you go back to the very, very first D&D, the DM rolled your stats for you and handed you your character with your stats rolled.
That was how it was written.
Yeah.
And virtually nobody played it that way, but that's
Yeah.
how it's.
Are you
had to
talking
do
about
it.
like the brown and white box?
Yeah,
Or-
the brown and
okay.
white box. Yeah.
Yeah, I never played it.
5 Torches Deep did something like that, real time. Yeah, I think that did come from some other system, maybe 5 Torches Deep.
Usually all these ideas came from somewhere else at some
Right.
point. Yeah.
At this point, there's hardly anything that you can do with its original, right? No attack rolls came from somewhere else. You were talking, Dave, about the hit point inflation in
Yeah.
5e. So they do a thing in Shadow Dark where you only get your hit point bonus for your con modifier at first level.
Yeah.
So the hit point inflation won't be there. You'll have very few hit points higher up. Didn't Arneson hide character stats from the players? I think he kind of hid hit points from the players, maybe stats too. So he would only tell you that you were, halfway wounded or feeling slightly wounded or something. You didn't know how many hit points you had exactly. Anything else from Shadow Dark, Dave?
No, that was my
Okay.
favorite part. Other than, it's just fun.
Yeah. All right. Chris, you got any other systems you can think of that are like, hey, this is the rule to bring in?
Nothing off the top of my head. I mean, most of my experience is with older systems that are generally pretty clunky.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the one nice thing about, what? Shadow Dark is like 5th edition basic. The rules are just 5th edition stripped down to the bare minimum. So it's like you could almost use those rules for a basic version of D&D. Spellcasting is fun with Shadow Dark, where you roll to keep your spell and they have effects on crit success fails. Yeah, although I've had players not like it when they never get any spells off because they fail their first rolls, and then they're trying to use a dagger. But I did generally like that. David, anything else from Shadow Dark? No,
Not for me.
Okay. What else do you want to cover, David?
Well, let's talk about some other game systems. Why don't we talk about last week we were talking a little bit about the dungeon game, 1,000 Dungeon, 100 Dungeons.
100
I can't remember
yeah.
how many number of dungeons it had. And there was a thing where you could trade in your inspiration to change something about the game, and hopefully changed it so that it showed something about your character and helped you out. And that kind of reminded me about the preparation role in I'm blanking.
Gumshoe?
Gumshoe, yes. Preparedness, that's it. Where you don't have to worry so much about what you've done in advance or how you've equipped your character or that kind of stuff. At some point, you can make a preparedness check to see if you've got the equipment or the setup that your character needs. And I like that as sort of a riff on the same thing with 100 Dungeons, because it enabled you to, say, in a D&D game, spend a point of inspiration and say, oh, by the way, I packed my live chicken, and this is just the thing that the goblins would love to have in trade, or anything like that. And hopefully you can make a case that this is something that your character might do as a prepared. You could, in a D&D game, you might spend it might spend inspiration. DM might allow it with a intelligence check, something like that. In a game based on heists like Leverage, they amplify this even more, where your character can make a flashback to something that happened before the gameplay started. And you can say, we're trying to get in this, distract this guard, but he's got a very alert dog. And now I'm going to flash back to the scene where I brought a bag full of steaks for the dog. And I happen to have those prepared. Or you can otherwise prepare things for a heist without getting mired in a lot of chat before the game where everybody's trying to come up with every possibility. It's something that can come up organically during the course of the game. So So I thought that was kind of an extension of the idea.
And
of
Blades
using
in the Dark had that
inspiration.
too. I think they had the flashback, right?
Yeah, it might be a mechanic from Blades in the Dark.
Right. A lot of modern games are going this route where you just assume you have what you need. I know they're saying that they're doing that in MCDM. Basically, if you have a skill, you have the tools for the skill. You can assume that. I think it's a little bit of today's, generation, or getting new players in the game who don't want to go through the minutia of prepping every last thing that the character is carrying.
Yeah,
I
it's
enjoy that, but I think a lot of people probably don't.
definitely a say yes approach that would
Yeah.
not fit in Shadow Dark, and both approaches can be fun.
Okay, progress clocks.
Progress clocks is something in Blades in the Dark, and there's not a lot of mechanics attached to this, but I thought it's a cool idea because it lets the DM or game master sort of communicate the state of play with the players and show them progress or setbacks real time in a way that's clearly communicated and makes them feel like they're sort of in control and understand the situation. The idea is you take a circle and mark it off into 4, 6, or 8 segments, and then there's a lot of different ways you can handle it. But if there's something where they've got to achieve a certain level of, say, agreement in a diplomatic challenge or something like that, you can mark off the pie wedges until, I don't know, you get enough votes from the town council, or until you get through a certain number of blocks on the way to your goal. It can also work the other way, where it's say they keep bringing up the issue of the alertness of a place where you're sneaking in and you're trying not to raise the alarm. You can mark off progress clock segments as the alertness.
I was going to bring that up. That's a good one, because I can't tell you how many D&D adventures I've been in where we're trying to sneak into a place, and every step we take, the DM asks for a stealth check, and any one failure, and we're busted.
Right.
So it feels like you have no chance whatsoever.
That's no fun. I mean, if you ask somebody to do enough checks, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
You could be the party of all ninjas, and eventually somebody's going to whiff. And the progress clock, you can be in that situation and show them the progress clock of alertness, and they know how their failed checks affect things. It's not a surprise when they start to get, as the tension starts to rise because they've blown a few checks, or they've dropped a bag of marbles on the floor of the vault, or whatever happens.
I really like this one, and I think Index Card RPG's got maybe kind of a similar thing, where anytime you're trying to do a skill type of thing, you can basically give, I think they use hearts in that game. Hearts, which are kind of like hits to overcome like all the locks on a trap, or all the locks on a door, or trigger mechanisms on a trap, or such like that. So anything like that you can present to the players, I think that's a pretty good idea.
I've seen, like in D&D, at least in third-party stuff, I'm not sure if it's been in any official adventures, where they don't do a progress clock per se, but the same idea where, maybe you are breaking in somewhere and there's an awareness level of the enemies, and this gives +1 to the awareness level, this gives -1. When it reaches this number, this happens, and this number, this happens, and that kind of thing. I've seen that kind of mechanic before.
Didn't they do that on an adventure, Keys from the Golden Vault, where you're going into the prison up north by the Rime of the Frost Maiden? I think they do it there. Okay. If you're looking for a D&D version of that, I think that's done there, yeah. Go ahead,
David. Very simple to implement, like in a D&D system.
Right, and it's mostly a communication tool, and it could go different ways. They have a lot of suggestions in the game, and I think Gumshoe has a free edition of their rules that follow it, so it's worth reading those 2 pages and get the ideas. And it's mechanics light, virtually no mechanics, so something you can easily drop into a game where you really want the players to be cognizant of either an emerging peril or their progress towards some sort of goal.
And then you had experience from Numenera.
Yeah, this Numenera has a couple of experience systems, and one of them is about DM intrusions, where you offer to give the players to hand the players a setback or a complication to their thing, to whatever their goal is, in exchange for experience points. But what I'm thinking about is the second way of gaining experience in Numenera. And I thought that this was really probably the best way to do experience if you're running sort of like a dungeon sandbox campaign or a West Marches style sandbox campaign, where the whole point of the game is to explore and find things. Because the idea is you, in Numenera, it's a game about discovery, and you're giving experience for players making discoveries. So if you had a sandbox game and you wanted it to drive players exploring, finding things out in the wild, and you didn't really want to just attach experience purely to gold and silver, because that kind of only lends itself to certain character types, the experience points attached to discovery system seemed like a really good idea, where you'd kind of parcel out the number of experience points needed for a party to level, at the level, across the level of the dungeon, add a little more because nobody's going to explore the whole thing. And then as they find things on the level of the dungeon, you award the experience for the discoveries, for the doors they open and to reach new places, for the secrets they uncover, and that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's a cipher system mechanic. Yeah. I don't know if it's in
I think
Monty's
Numenera is the cipher system, right?
It is the cipher system, yeah.
Specific setting. Yeah.
But the experience might be unique to Numenera. I know the other settings, maybe the games are not about the same things, so perhaps that doesn't have the same experience system.
If Ked Hub is watching, I'm sure he can answer.
And then I had a recommendation online from the FNDM. Where is it? Share this tab. He was talking about clean procedures. I'm like, what? Clean procedures? What's that? And he just said that in 5e D&D, they don't really go into a procedure for all the different styles of play. You have the procedure that you have when you're doing combat, and it's pretty straightforward. But a lot of the newer systems are doing a sequence of play for dungeon adventuring. They might have a sequence of play for wilderness adventuring. You check the weather, you do this, you check for wandering monsters. I know Shadow Dark definitely had that. So that's I think a little bit better game design for the newer systems to have that kind of stuff, not just assume that we're all real experienced DMs and we just know how to do that right. Now, let's talk about 2024 D&D. So how far along do you think they are? How close to having these characters right do we think that they are? Are they balanced correctly? Are they fun to play? Are they too powerful, not powerful enough? Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so in a playtest, you're never going to get perfect balance, right? I think that's an expectation you can't possibly have, because this is stuff that's coming out of people's creativity, right? And they're sort of slapping it on a page and letting us, what do you think? And do you like it or not like it? But without knowing what every decision they're going to make all the way to the end is, there's nothing to balance against, right? I do think a lot of important balance things have happened, because one of the issues, like if you're an optimizer, one of the issues with D&D is that there are outliers. In other words, you can play a fighter, you can play a rogue, you can play a wizard, and if you take just magic missile and lightning bolt and all that with your wizard, you're no stronger than the other characters. But when you are an optimizer, you're looking at all the options and weighing them and analyzing mechanics. There are certain options in the game that are so good that they throw the balance out of whack. You alluded to how I talked about like removing the shield spell.
Removing that one.
Yeah,
Yeah, that one spell on every level. Force
but
cage.
but shield isn't even the worst offender, right? And in a lot of cases, these options are even game breaking, right? Like if you look at the 7th level spell Simulacrum, you put that in the hands of somebody who's going to pull all the levers, it'll end your campaign, right? A magic jar can do the same thing. Magic jar plus Simulacrum. But anyways, it gets out of hand, right? So when I saw, like, in our last playtest, Conjure Animals was gone essentially, and they had a new spell that they called Conjure Animals that is very lightly related to the original. I find that really encouraging because it suggests to me, okay, here's a spell that does break games. It's clunky, right? It's one of the least favorite and most favorite spells there is. They have the courage to go in there and say, okay, we're not going to try to fix it. Out it goes. We're going to get, we got some NPC in some previous adventure that's got Conjure Animal, so we need to have a Conjure Animal spell. Here's a new one. That really speaks to me in terms of, like, these guys and gals are willing to make some pretty brave decisions. So I was really encouraged. The last playtest, I around playtest 6 and 7, I was starting to wonder, right, whether I was going to be really happy or if it was just going to feel like 5th edition with some tweaks. But this last one I found really encouraging, and I gotta think there's a lot going behind the scenes that we don't see in the playtests, right? Because it's not necessarily even to their advantage to say, well, here's a Simulacrum spell, and we've nerfed the crap out of it, right?
Right.
What do you think?
You killed your puppy. How do you like it?
Is there value to that process, or do you just do it? Pull the trigger, put it in because it's good for the game and you know it. Yeah. And I feel like that's maybe what we've got going on. I'm hoping, but I think I'm fairly optimistic that they're going to have a product that is a significant improvement. It's of course not going to be perfect. There's going to be balance issues. We're still going to find things that break, right? Yeah. Because we're relentless. We love to wreck our own game. I don't know why, but there's something in my head that's broken that way.
Okay, Chris, let's say you're opening the 2024 Player's Handbook and paging through it.
Yeah.
Can you give us a list of things that you're going to look for and say, I wonder if they fixed this or how they changed it to make it better, or did they not fix it?
I can name some stuff off the top of my head. What pages are
you going to?
Yeah, I'm going right to the spellcasting rules. And the first thing I'm looking for is bonus action spellcasting. Second thing I'm looking at is spell focuses and material components. And
go ahead and expand on these things.
Okay. So the bonus action spellcasting rule is terrible, right? It's one of the worst rules in the book. It says if you cast a spell as a bonus action, any other spell you cast on your turn can only be a spell with a casting time of 1 action. A cantrip with a casting time of 1 action. Sorry. And it's an awful rule that everyone misremembers. I probably explain it every couple months to somebody who is still convinced there's a rule somewhere that says you can't cast 2-leveled spells on a turn, or doesn't understand that if they cast a cantrip with a bonus action, they can't cast counterspell on the same turn. And it's so clunky. Yeah. And you can and yes, you can do a quicken fireball and then cast firebolt, but you can't do a quicken firebolt and cast fireball on the same turn, right?
And then they came and changed the fighter's action surge, right?
Yeah, and yes. So what they've done in the playtest so far is action surge says specifically it can't be used for the magic action, and quicken spell specifically says it can't be done on the same turn as casting another leveled spell. So I think they're gonna just get rid of it. Yeah, I think it'll be gone. But going to double check to make sure it's gone.
Okay.
But I think they're just going to get rid of it, and you'll be able to Misty Step and cast another level spell. But you're not going to be able to do a Quicken spell and another level spell.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing I'm going to check for. The rules for components for spells are awful. Nobody knows whether you need a hand free for your somatic component or not. Do you have to hold your focus or just touch it? Can you do that in the same hand?
Can it just be painted on your shield?
So I don't know what they're going to do with this stuff because they haven't put it in playtests. But they're going to do something, right? So I'll be curious whether they fixed it or not. They'll change it, and it'll either be fixed or it'll be something else that's bad. But
I've written 2 blog posts complaining about that over the last few years, and I suspect I had long suspected that I was the only person who cared. So, Chris,
you are not the only person who cares.
I'm not alone. I'm not alone.
I used to care and police it a lot, my players, and then I just gave up.
I have given up too. I've given up too. I would just like simplified rules. I think it would be easy to do, and they could be more restrictive, less restrictive. Doesn't matter, just as long as they're easy to understand. Because right now you got this thing where like you can do a somatic component with your hand that's holding your spell focus, or as long as the spell requires the spell focus to cast. But if it doesn't, then you can't. Yeah.
Right.
That's in the rules right now.
I think if they could land someplace where you didn't normally have to worry about it, but if you were some sort of rules lawyer, you couldn't plot some sort of shenanigans where you do your turn, you stow your shield on your turn to do stuff with 2 hands, and then re-equip your shield off your turn to have the heightened AC. That kind of shenanigans.
The issue with shields is they actually require an action. So it's the stuff you can play with your interactions. That's when the shenanigans start occurring.
Yeah.
It'd be like where the guy who has the sword and he can't draw the sword and sheathe the sword on the same turn. But he wants to have his hand free for counterspell or whatever when it's not his turn.
Yeah.
So he'll draw his sword, attack, and then drop it.
Yeah.
And then on the beginning of his next turn, pick it up and then attack and drop it again.
Yeah, that's annoying.
Maybe you just need a DM to say no.
Well, you do.
I don't know.
Yeah, you do. But DMs can get intimidated.
Absolutely. Nobody wants to say no.
And I've planned this out, and this is legal by the rules.
Especially if you're DMing for pay at a convention. People are showing up to play in the game, and especially if it's like an Adventure League game where they know the rules better than you do, and they're paying to sit there, then you really feel like, I gotta just let them do what they want to do.
My entire character concept, Tom, is based on dropping my sword between turns, and now it's ruined.
Yeah,
it's funny though, because I care about that stuff a lot, but then when I sit down and as a player at a table and someone's doing stuff like that, it doesn't bug me.
It bugs me. If it's really
more like defending others than I care about, how it affects me really.
No, as soon as I expect people to optimize around me because I'm an optimizer, and and I appreciate good optimization. But when the shenanigans start occurring, there's a specific kind of optimization that I consider to be practical, and certain kind of consider theoretical, right? So when that guy beside me is now, I got Magic Jar and Simulacrum, and here's how I'm going to combine them to become. And then I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I played an Adventurers League game with somebody who had Simulacrum and his wizard, and I had a slow cleric who always rolled initiative last. I don't think I got a turn through the whole thing. It was at the end of the game. It was, this guy could have been saying, I won D&D for you. You're welcome. It just wasn't that fun. But we were going down your list.
Rules look at
yeah.
Hiding invisible.
And so I have a list of spells that is not in front of me right now, but I've done a video where I've listed them off. I will be looking at all those spells.
Yeah.
Right. So I will look at Simulacrum and the Shield spell and Magic Jar and True Polymorph and and work my way down and see what they've done with those spells, because that's if the outlier spells remain as they are, there's no way to balance the game.
Yeah.
You can play with and we kind of criticized in my community, Wizards of the Coast, a bit for starting with classes rather than spells, because how do you balance classes when spells are what they are?
There's been a bit of hubris throughout 5th edition design where all the spells that have been problematic, except possibly for Shield, have been things that have not reached players for playtesting. And I think the designer mindset, at least it seems to be, it can't possibly be this, right? The designer mindset is, these are not class features. It's not important to power balance so much that we get the spells right. But they absolutely are. Every wizard who can cast Fireball is going to, prepare Fireball. That is the baseline ability of that class that sets them to that 5th level power jump. It's so intrinsic, some of these spells, to how powerful these classes are.
I don't think Fireball is a problem.
It is not a problem, but it is the
fine.
benchmark that sets, that when you're talking about 5th level, warrior classes, they get the extra attack. Bards get Hypnotic Pattern, and wizards get Fireball. And that's why those classes take a leap in power at 5th level. Clerics get
Spirit Guardians.
Spirit Guardians, exactly. Without those spells, setting that 5th level jump for those classes, they would be much weaker at that level.
Yeah.
Good question here on Monster Initiative, but let's get through the rest of the things we're looking at in the Player's Handbook, and then we'll talk about the monsters in a second. Okay, Player's Handbook.
We were talking about Shenanigans, and I just saw a name come up on your screen, Ramen Goblin. There you are, Ramen.
There
All
he is.
right. Okay, so he's one of my patrons. I just want to share his latest Shenanigans, which has infected my patron one-shots now. So the characters are playing at higher level. So what he will do is he will bring a rock. He casts True Polymorph on the rock to turn it into a Shatterkai Gloomstalker, or a Gloomweaver, the one with the super spear that can also spellcast as part of their multi-attack, that he then magic jars. And then he plays that through the dungeon, and it regenerates every turn. And that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. that I call Shenanigans.
All right. So you got a bit less supposed to look at class powers that needed to be fixed. That looks like they're mostly getting fixed. Paladin smiting.
Once per turn.
Stunning.
Once per turn.
Yeah.
The Paladin aura is still by far one of the best powers. It makes or breaks a party, and they're not changing that, it appears.
Which was really disappointing.
Yeah.
That is,
we were discussing in my circle how they were going to fix Paladin aura, because more than Smite, Smite is not nearly the balance issue that the aura is. Yeah. And we thought, maybe there'll be a reaction to give the bonus or something like that. Nope, no change.
No change. It is by far, if you got a Paladin with that aura, your party's going to be able to take on quite a bit more opponents.
It's game changing. Yeah.
Okay, so monsters getting initiative. So when we played MCDM, that was really refreshing to have my elite guy go twice right at the start of the round. The worst that would happen is one character would go before that elite guy. That'd be the worst that could happen. Most D&D games I play, almost the whole party's going before the first monster's going, because everyone's got things to up their initiative, right? And monsters don't. So to do an alternate initiative would be huge, but then you'd have all those powers that are useless now that characters have to boost their initiative, right? So
wouldn't it be cool?
It's a big fix.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be cool if some of the character powers in D&D grew in power as the encounter went on? So say Smite, this is just a hypothetical. Every round you added another Smite die. So by round 5, you could do 5D instead of 1D. you know, that would be so much cooler than having the Paladin go Nova on the first turn and win D&D for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, MCDM turning on its head like that, making the powers of the party grow round by round, and in later encounters start out pretty high and then grow. It was really interesting. It made a huge difference in how the encounters went. Too late to do that in D&D, though, I'm afraid.
Yeah,
I don't know.
late.
Yeah, you would need an entirely different edition.
I'll add that to my list of things that I would do if I were king of D&D. Chris, silvery bards, yay or nay?
I was slow on the bandwagon, but I'm currently at nay. I think everyone kind of jumped on that spell right away and said ban, right? Like on publication day.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't there because, you know, I hadn't experienced it, right? And I'm thinking it is just one attack, but or one saving throw, and it uses up your reaction, right? But I have come to the point where, as a DM, when you're running a one shot for two different groups, and one group has silvery barbs and one doesn't, and so in the one session, the monsters always fail their saving throw. That's important, and no one gets the enemies never get critical hits, and then the other session they do, and it's a first level spell that makes that difference. That's a problem. Yeah,
definitely. Okay, let's get a couple more questions in here. Corel, I feel like for 2024, they're better off aiming low on spells to start with, since it's so easy to add new ones compared to class features. I'm not sure what. I mean, they're going to release all the spells at once, so.
Yeah. I have a feeling most of the spells we're not going to see in playtest form.
Wizards get Hypnotic Pattern 2. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've always recommended that Wizards get Hypnotic Pattern instead of Fireball. Yeah.
Okay.
Player's Handbook.
Of course, the Bard should have an Instrument of the Bards.
My first 5th level Wizard Handbook, I said, take Hypnotic Pattern, not Fireball.
Yeah, it's powerful.
It is powerful.
Yeah.
During the Adventurers League for a while, there was one adventure that readily gave bards that instrument that granted everyone disadvantage.
Ridiculous.
Saves. Yeah. It was punishing for the monsters, and me on Team Evil, I like to get some licks in instead of just having the players beat the hypnotized monsters to death.
AO Defend, Smite is what makes Paladin the only decent martial. The aura makes them a great tank support. It's fine, but it's also totally free. The nice thing about the aura is it benefits the whole party, so the party doesn't feel bad about the fact that the Paladin's so great. It just means that the DM's got to up the opponents you're facing.
Yeah,
it changes bouncing encounters. Yeah, that's the main issue.
Yeah, 100%.
Dakota R. Bowman, fixing Paladin Aura would require fixing saves in general for 5e. It trivializes saves at low levels, but feels needed at high. I kind of disagree. By the time, they're high level, they're given +6 on every saving throw.
I had a thought about saving throws, and I'm curious about your guys' opinions, because I was just brainstorming. What if you weren't proficient in any saving throw, and spell DCs were didn't go up with your proficiency bonus?
So it'd make it like more.
So your saving throw. So if you make a strength saving throw, it's D20 plus your strength modifier.
Mm-hmm.
And saving throw DCs, because you get into this situation at higher levels in D&D where the difference between proficient save and a non-proficient save is so big that you end up with a lot of saving throws that some characters have no problem with, and other characters have no chance of succeeding.
Yeah.
And if you were to do it so you have a DC of 8 plus your spellcasting modifier or whatever, maybe plus spell level or something, I don't know. And then just a static amount for your saving throw, you could potentially not have that, right?
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah,
and it wouldn't be huge to modification to bring that into your game. I don't think. I think you could just do it.
It'd be interesting to see how it played out.
Yeah.
Okay, we got, I like the idea of making Paladin Aura as a channel divinity option. You can make it stronger because it's limited use and opportunity cost. Like for a short duration, maybe?
Yeah, are they saying that you would raise your aura with the channel divinity?
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a possibility. Then we got give the aura to the monk.
Yeah. They gave the monk enough.
Yeah.
If
If
you
good.
think monks are underpowered, you're not building them right, because if you maximize their wisdom save to stun, they're a bear to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now that they only got 1 stun, though, a lot less.
Hard to disagree with you there.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I'm well.
The old monk, that was important when they could stun over and over.
Stance. And there's a lot of reasons for it. But Stunning Strike is a highly overrated feature, unless you're in a group where it never works, in which case then it can be an underrated feature. It's an okay feature because hitting con saves is not ideal. And there are a lot of creatures that do not have a hard time resisting your Stunning Strikes, and key runs out fast.
Yeah.
It
Back
does.
when you could do it over and over, and you
always hear the story from the person, oh, but I hit 4 creatures and with flurry blows and stunned all 4 of them. Yeah, that's great, but you did not have an average experience. Right.
That's true.
You defied the odds. The odds were maybe one would fail and use a legendary resistance and ignore you anyway.
Pass Without Trace needs nerfing. The surprise mechanic is such an insane swing that it makes.
There's the next one.
Yeah.
That reminds me. Thanks, Ramen. By the way, I should also point out, Ramen was pointing out earlier that the Shatterkai Gloomweaver is immune to exhaustion. And part of the reason you want that is because you're doing a chronologist who has that crazy mechanic that allows them to make anything a success or a fail, but it costs them exhaustion, so that they can do that for free. Yeah, because that's who Ramen Goblin is. But I am hoping the surprise rules are gone, or are just advantage on initiative if you have surprise. I think that might happen too, and I think there's been some hints.
Next one, surprise, is hopefully getting fixed. Then we got next one is Bowman. You could accomplish the same effect if characters were proficient in every save. Would allow higher level characters to feel more durable, whereas just removing the proc bonus from both sides doesn't.
Yeah, I guess it would, but then what's the point?
Yeah.
Right? Like you're adding an extra math step that doesn't do anything. +5 but the difficulty is 5 higher, right?
Yeah. So this was on the aura suggestion. Yeah, like a 1 minute duration on aura using channel divinity. Then we got referring to Chris's suggestion to remove the prop bonus from both. Yeah, that was about the same with Rose. Last month, our monks done 3 creatures in 2 fights. Chris.
Yes, that was one of the Defy the Odds sessions.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we kind of broke the will of a DM. Now, Adventure League sucks because the DMs feel so restrained. Like they feel like they can't put a real challenge to the party. And so when you're kind of in an optimized group of players and you bring a monk in and he stuns the big bad guy every fight, the DM at the end of the session was like, well, these ones are immune to stun. It's like, okay.
Well, at some point, this DM who rolls all dice in the open started hiding the saves versus the Stunning Strike.
Yeah.
Because he just got so tired of his the monsters getting whipped.
Okay, so monster manual. So I always see people say, why don't you just make it so it's a challenge? But you can't, because the difference between a group of people just picking up the game with some beer and pretzels and don't care versus a highly optimized group who are focusing all their fire and using good tactics, they can take on at least twice as much. So you can't balance. You have to have what you need is a way to scale it. The DM should have the tools where he can just scale up the monsters. And I used to scale up hit points, but that just made it a slog. So I started scaling up damage, and that makes it exciting and tense because the monsters are dealing out tons of damage. But the party can survive it, because they're optimized. They got the paladin, they got the leadership feat, they got the healer feat. They can just they got Death Ward on half the party. They can take that 150 points of dragon damage and come out okay.
It makes those concentration rolls
makes
really
concentration hard to
tough.
make. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I do enjoy telling a player, please make a concentration roll, DC 46 or something like that.
Yeah.
That advantage just doesn't help that much under those circumstances.
Yeah, and you have Portent, and you have Silvery Barbs. It's like the difference between parties. There's no way you can have a quote, good challenge on the monsters.
He's telling you how they made the monk not terrible.
Got it.
Yeah.
Healing Word and Yo-Yo Healing.
Hate it. Yeah, I hate it.
Yeah. What do you do to stop it? You could do what MCDM does, but that's risky because everyone just then dies at the end, right?
Okay. I think one thing you can do is which we've seen some of in the playtest, is make in-combat healing more effective so that they don't go down in the first place, because it's just the better deal right now to let somebody fall to 0 and then healing word them, right?
Yeah.
Because all that extra damage is gone.
Yep.
And so you don't have to heal it. Well, if you healed them before they went down, then they lose those hit points. So it does help a little bit if they make in-combat healing more effective, but it doesn't fix the problem.
Yeah. I always cringe when I'm DMing and I see a party start to heal in combat. I'm like, oh, you just wasted your turn and he's going to take that much damage next hit. You need to be on the offensive if you want to in this fight. Being on the defensive, you're just wasting turns, and because they can't heal as fast. They don't heal fast enough. Yeah. Okay. Well, what else do we want to cover? If anyone had any Roll20 questions, ask away. If you have any more questions for Chris or David, any last words, Chris or David, before we wrap it up?
I'm glad to see that in the playtest that the monk no longer sucks.
Yeah, much better.
That was for you.
I say, if you're designing a monk, focus on those wisdom saves. Focus on the wisdom score to make those saves as hard as possible. Forget AC. Nobody's attacking you and hitting you when they've got stars and birds whirling around their head, metaphorically speaking. So that's my strategy. But
and I just want to see the next playtest. It should be out soon, I hope. And hopefully there's one more. They've talked about how they need to do one more loop on a couple of classes. Do you remember what those classes were?
No, that was before the last one.
Oh, it was. Okay.
They said they need to do one more on Druid, Barbarian, and Monk, which we got in the last playtest.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean that they'll necessarily have gotten all great scores, right?
Yeah.
So maybe they'll want to do one of them yet again. I don't know. I honestly don't know what to expect in the next Unearthed Arcana. And we were discussing before the camera went on whether there would even be one.
Yeah. Is the player's handbook done? If they're going to actually ship on 521 or have it in our hands on 521, they got to be getting done soon. That's for sure.
Yeah, my money's on no more players' handbook playtests. Anything we might see now will be Monsters or Dungeon Master's Guide.
All right. Chris, you got a live stream coming up on Thursday, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's on Insight Check's YouTube channel, and we're doing the playtest. And I'm playtesting a monk.
Very good.
So, yeah.
Nice.
And we've got a cleric, and we've got a monk druid multiclass.
Very good. Cleric could be interesting. What subclass?
And so the cleric is going to be a light cleric, I believe.
Okay.
I am doing a mercy monk. The other character or other player, who's Colby from D4 Deep Dive, is doing open hand and the Way of the Sea druid.
Sea druid would be interesting.
Yeah, the new subclass. I playtested that one. It is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone. Thanks for watching. Chris, thanks for coming on. David, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.